Scale modeling can be a great experience if you do the right things. And building a plastic model kit does not have to be so difficult. That is what I'm going to show you. So today I will tell you 10 tips to get the most out of your scale model. In this video I will use this liter Firefly in 1/72 scale. Building a plastic kit from hundreds of parts might seem intimidating or stressful, but just by applying some basic rules and use the correct tools, it's easy to get a good looking result. Tip number 1. Always follow the instructions. I always say it, and it is true. The first thing you have to do when you buy a new model kit is to study the kit instructions. This is because these documents contain the key points of our model, including the deployment of the different sprues and the different decal options you have. You can see how each part is fitted and also how to work with the different sub-assemblies. In most of kits, it's very common to work with some built-in options that you have to deal with. There might be some steps to avoid, or use a specific piece instead of a similar one. So you have to be aware if you don't want to make big mistakes. A good tip is to mark in the paper the steps you want to follow and cross out the steps you should avoid. For finishing, and if you look careful, every kit instructions tell you the paint you should use for each camouflage or details, and also can show you some useful modeling brands' color references. So remember this the next time you start a new model. Tip number 2. Be accurate while cutting. For removing correctly all the pieces from the sprue, you don't need fancy and expensive tools. You can see how I cut all these plastic joints with these common clippers. Now keep an eye in the cutting process. I try to make the cut far from the edge of the piece. This will prevent me to make some damage to the final piece. Every time you want to make a cut, take your time and think which is the best option to make it. Positioning the clippers is also crucial. For the most cases, you should use the flat side facing to the plastic piece, and this will help you to get better results. And finally, I strongly recommend to remove these big plastic remnants with the clippers. The result will be better, and you will not expose your fingers to dangerous blades. Tip number 3. Crafting knives. Crafting knives are one of the essential tools to use when building a plastic kit, and at the same time the most dangerous, so please be careful when using them. Apart from the evident use for cutting excess of plastic, in my case I don't use them too much for this purpose. Instead, these crafting knives had a very handy use for removing heavy mold lines. Using their blade for scraping the plastic allows you to remove easily the mold lines from big and flat pieces. This is a technique that I use extensively, and it can save you tons of time. You can invest in painting, for example. Just pay attention how quick it is to clean this gun barrel and getting a smooth result using a crafting knife. Tip number 4. Sanding. If you are looking for some professional results, there is no other way than using sandpaper or any other type of abrasive tools for smoothing your model. A good option for beginners, and my personal choice, is to use common sandpaper. I like to use hard grits for plastic modeling, because plastic it's not a very hard surface to work with. A 6 or 800 grit it's quite okay. Because plastic injection technology is not perfect, you can find in most cases some mold lines or flashes in your kits that you should deal with. Trust me that there is any worse experience than paint your model and later see these ugly mold lines there. When in the workbench, just a light pressure is needed while sanding, and progressively keep working until the piece gets completely smooth. So make sure you remove any imperfection in the plastic surface your next time. Tip number 5. Try fitting. For those of you who are more experienced, I'm really sure you appreciate this procedure. Depending on the brand kit, the mold fitting can be better or not, but you should try this in every single piece. Please check how they fit in their final place before gluing them. This might seem something obvious, but it can prevent you from some future frustrations. Try fit allows you to anticipate to some potential mistakes that would cause you some extra work. In this case, the main part of the hull does not fit well with the lower structural area. So, because I got anticipated, I could glue first this joint and then, when dry, I'll be able to adapt the rest of the piece without any problem. Tip number 6. Use specific glues for modeling. using a good model in cement is going to be crucial while building your model. And there are plenty of options when choosing a model in cement, but in this case I recommend you to use glues which are labeled as extra thin. The good thing about the extra thin cements is that they're extremely powerful, holding the pieces strong and quickly, at the same time that they don't leave any residue. You can apply the cement directly in the joint, or they can be also applied by capillarity. This is a super useful feature that I absolutely love. You can see that I don't care for being extremely precise when gluing, and even though the cement works at all. Another interesting use for these cements consists in applying the glue very softly over the previously sanded pieces. The solvent inside the cement melts the plastic, leaving the surface completely smooth. So this is a super fast and easy trick to apply in your models and getting great results. For finishing, a last trick for gluing two parts pieces. Instead of gluing the two parts together, fill the gap in between and polish the surface. If you apply a generous amount of cement for gluing them, the behavior of the cement will melt both parts until they become a solid one. The only thing you have to do when they dry is to remove the excess and sand in a little bit. And boom, now you have a perfect and solid muzzle brake. Tip number 7. Keep tracks and wheels in a separate piece. This is going to be the only time when I recommend you to skip some steps from the kit instructions. You can glue all the parts together and it will be okay, but what about if there were a formula to paint more comfortable the tracks and wheels? Well, to make this, the only thing you have to do is to take some white glue. And yes, just common white glue. As you might think, it won't hold the plastic pieces firmly, but in this case it will be extremely useful later. In this case with the Sherman, I glue each boogie with white glue. And once it's dry, I start gluing all the link and length tracks in position. In this kit you can find some holes that fit perfectly with these other marks in the boogies that will help you for a correct positioning. In these steps, I like to have all the parts prepared and sanded, ready to be put in place. For getting a solid block of plastic, it is important to glue everything correctly, so make sure you apply a good amount of cement. Also, some corrections might be needed to remove some extra plastic for getting a better fitting. And finally, when everything has been glued and the cement is completely cured, you can remove the whole piece safely with no issues, thanks to the white glue. Just consider to try this your next time. You can leave in the comments if you find this way more useful while painting. Tip number 8. Cap filling and texturing. By this time of the model building, you can experiment some errors and mistakes while cutting and removing undesired amount of plastic. Or simply the model fits really bad and you have big gaps that should not be there. Now is when modeling putties give us a second chance to correct these areas. There are plenty of options available in the market, and I recommend you to try and choose a putty that becomes more useful for you. In this case I used the Tamiya basic putty diluted with some acetone. In the model there were some gaps between the front armor and the side mounts for the driver sprocket wheels that needed to be filled. So I just applied the diluted putty directly in the gaps until I completely covered them. Also, you can use modeling putties for texturing your models. In some cases like this Sherman turret, it's necessary to represent some casting texture in the surface. So just by leaving some putty and applying quick touches with an oil brush, with this technique you can achieve pretty quick and interesting results in your model kits. And once painted, you will be able to see the cool armor texture and how your model looks heavier. Tip number 9. Adding easy details. Scale model kits once completed out of the box are pretty decent, but there are always some easy improvements to make that will increase the general amount of detail. This type of detailing is very easy to do and most of times can be done with homemade materials. In this case the muzzle brake of the gun, once glued it comes in a solid state, but with the help of a hand drill we can make some holes and hollow the piece. Look at the result now and the effort I invested in. I think that the detail is worth enough. In other cases you can represent some missing parts that are not included in the kit. For this you have to search for some references of your model, and you can compare and decide what type of missing details you want to include. In this case you can see how some copper wire cut and bended becomes a lifting hook once put in place in the top of the turret. Another detail which can be improved is the coaxial machine gun. We can make it sharper just by drilling the gun. Finally, I found the most drapes. In this case I tried to represent the missing light protectors. In this particular kit, Airfix didn't include these parts, so I chose to create them for my own. I took some metal sheet and I cut with my scissors a thin strip. Taking some reference photos, I cut and bent in size and shaped the metal strip. And for gluing in place the metal parts, I recommend you to use some CA glue, because obviously plastic cement doesn't work with metal pieces. Tip number 10. Customization. One thing I like to make in every model I build is to give my own touches to it. If you prefer to build it completely out of the box, it's totally fine. But in this case I decided to modify some tiny parts to make my model different and unique. In this case, and because I didn't like too much the rear fenders of the tank, I decided to remove them by cutting the plastic pieces. Also, this kit from Airfix comes with a very useful sprue, full of optional and spare parts that you can use to customize your scale model. So why don't use them in this kit? First, I made some testing, holding the spare pieces with glue tack, and when I'm happy with the result, I glue each part in place. Again, searching for some historical photos becomes very inspiring. In this case, it was very common to see British tanks in the European theatre wearing extra armor made of track links. When all the plastic links were fitted, I added some extra stowage for creating some more variety. And again, it is just a matter of decide where to glue each little piece. So that's the completed Firefly model, just after applying all the tips I've shown to you. I have enjoyed this assembly a lot, because there have been years since I built my last 1/72 scale model. What do you think? Do you find these tips useful for building your models? I hope that you find this video entertaining and educating, or at least you could learn something new. Very soon I'll be painting this little British guy in the channel. So thanks for watching, and I see you in the next one.